It was just before sunrise in the quiet farming town of Ashton, Iowa. Every morning, 62-year-old farmer Thomas Walker followed the same routine. He poured a cup of black coffee, greeted his loyal dog Max, and drove his old tractor toward the endless rows of corn that had been in his family for generations. Thomas lived alone. His wife had passed away years earlier, and his only son had moved across the country. The silence of the farm had become a part of his life. But on one unforgettable morning, that silence was broken forever. As Thomas inspected his crops, Max suddenly stopped running. The dog barked loudly and rushed toward a patch of tall grass near the edge of the field. At first, Thomas assumed it was a wounded animal. But as he got closer, he heard something that made his heart stop. A baby was crying. Wrapped in a faded blue blanket was a tiny infant, no more than a few days old. The little girl's cheeks were cold from the morning air, and her tiny fingers trembled as she cried. Thomas immediately removed his work jacket and carefully wrapped it around her. "You're safe now," he whispered with tears filling his eyes. He called 911, and within minutes, police officers and paramedics arrived. The baby was rushed to the nearest hospital while investigators searched the area for clues. No diaper bag, no note, no identification. It was as if the child had simply appeared in the middle of the field. News of the mysterious discovery spread across the country. Television crews arrived, neighbors offered prayers, and people everywhere wondered the same question: who could leave an innocent child alone in a cornfield? Doctors confirmed that the baby was healthy, despite spending several hours outside. They estimated she had been abandoned sometime during the night. Thomas couldn't stop thinking about her. Every day, he visited the hospital after finishing work on the farm. He held her tiny hand, talked softly to her, and read children's books, even though she was too young to understand. The nurses noticed something special. Whenever Thomas entered the room, the baby stopped crying almost instantly. She seemed to recognize his voice. Weeks passed, but investigators found no parents or relatives. Despite nationwide appeals, no one came forward. Child Protective Services placed the baby into temporary foster care. Thomas returned to his quiet farmhouse, but nothing felt the same anymore. The empty rooms echoed louder than ever before. One evening, while sitting on his porch watching the sunset, Thomas made the biggest decision of his life. He wanted to adopt her. Many people doubted him. They questioned whether a widowed farmer in his 60s could raise a child. Thomas simply smiled. "I may not be young," he said, "but I know what love looks like." The adoption process took months. Social workers inspected his home, interviewed neighbors, and carefully reviewed every part of his life. They found a kind, patient, hard-working man with a stable home and an enormous heart. Finally, the judge approved the adoption. The little girl who had once been abandoned in a lonely field officially became Thomas Walker's daughter. He named her Grace. The farmhouse that had once been silent filled with laughter. Toy boxes replaced dusty corners. Tiny shoes appeared beside muddy work boots. Every evening after finishing farm work, Thomas taught Grace about kindness, honesty, and the beauty of simple living. Years passed quickly. Grace grew into a bright, compassionate young woman. She loved reading beneath the old oak tree where Thomas often rested after long days in the fields. She helped neighbors, volunteered in her community, and dreamed of becoming a pediatric nurse because, as she often said, "Someone once saved my life. I want to spend my life saving others." On her 18th birthday, Thomas finally shared the full story of how they first met. Grace listened quietly, tears streaming down her face. "You didn't just find me," she said. "You chose me." Thomas smiled through his own tears. "No," he replied softly. "I believe God placed you exactly where I needed to find you." Years later, Grace graduated at the top of her nursing class. During the graduation ceremony, she invited Thomas onto the stage. Before hundreds of people, she hugged him tightly and said, "The greatest blessing in my life wasn't the career I earned today. It was the father who never gave up on a little girl everyone else had forgotten." The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. As the applause echoed through the auditorium, Thomas looked at Grace with pride. He realized that the greatest harvest of his entire life had never grown from the soil. It had been wrapped in a blue blanket, crying alone in a quiet field, waiting for someone with enough love to stop and listen. Sometimes, the greatest miracles aren't found in places we expect. Sometimes, they are waiting in the middle of an ordinary day, ready to change a life forever.